On August 7th, 2000, a windsurfer was riding the waves of the California Delta. He noticed a dark object floating ahead. As he approached, he discovered it was a sports bag. Intrigued, the man opened it and was horrified by the contents. Inside were bags containing human body parts. The witness didn't know he was looking at the results of an unholy sacrifice by a self-proclaimed prophet named Jordan and his cult followers who called themselves Children of Thunder. In reality, Jordan was 30-year-old Glenn Taylor Helzer. This man had taken the name after the Jordan River, knowing that through the deep waters of sin, he was destined to cross from the light side, where he was a family man, broker, Mormon, and preacher, to the dark shore, where he became a killer. Nobody ever joins a cult. A person joins a group that protects the environment or animal rights. They simply attend yoga classes or a business seminar, maybe get interested in Eastern practices that bring peace and calm. They find like-minded people. The recruit shouldn't realize they are being recruited. 26-year-old Dawn Godman also had no idea she would soon join a preacher's cult that would involve her in a bloody war against the established order of the Mormon Church, the government, and the devil himself. Dawn was born in California and lived with her parents in a remote house surrounded by oaks and pines. Her father was seriously ill. Her mother had to support the family, and from the age of 10, the girl took care of household. At a young age, Dawn learned to shoot pistols and rifles and was a really country girl. At 17, Dawn had a boyfriend named Patrick, and she married him. A year later, they had a son. However, the marriage didn't last long. To support herself and her son, Dawn studied nursing and got a job at a nurse's aide in a nursing home. Everything seemed to be going well, but at 22, she started using methamphetamine. She lost her job, and her ex-husband got custody of their son. By 1996, Dawn was living in her car or in a tent in the forest. Drugged and desperate, she attempted suicide. After spending 3 days in a psychiatric hospital, Dawn thought about whether she really wanted to die. She decided to change her life for the sake of her 6-year-old son. Dawn's parents were Pentecostals. Seeking support in faith, she joined a congregation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Dawn began attending church every Sunday, took classes for converts, and finally became a full member. She was making great progress in life and looked forward to the day when she could get full custody of her son. In 1998, the congregation in Walnut Creek held a game night. Participants organized a quest called Murder Mystery Dinner. 2 young men attended the event. Their appearance didn't match the strict Mormon image, untidy, long-haired, like 19th century preachers. Their names were Taylor and Justin Helzer. Most people avoided the strange pair, and no one came up to say hello. No one except Dawn Godman. The next time Dawn met the Helzer brothers was about a week later at an LDS church meeting. It was Testimony Sunday, where any parishioner could stand up and speak about faith and religion. Taylor began his speech. It was a captivating, powerful, bravura performance. He charmed the assembly. Dawn was also impressed. She began seeking opportunities to meet with Taylor and talk about the scriptures, revelations, and the Spirit. Usually after church services, members went to Bible or Book of Mormon study classes. However, there was a tradition of meeting in the parking lot for those who wanted to discuss issues in a more informal setting. And Taylor, accompanied by his brother Justin, began conducting his own lessons in the parking lot. For several weeks, about 20 people came to listen to the charismatic preacher, skipping official classes. Taylor was dramatic, spoke with great conviction and passion, instructing his growing flock, but his messages differed from the main LDS faith concepts. He talked about how the modern church had strayed from the path of old teachings. Taylor claimed to know how to live a perfect life without sin. He considered himself flawless, beloved by God. He never said directly that he was a prophet, but certainly made others believe it. and Dawn believed. The Helzer brothers' parents led a typical middle-class life that included church, family, work, and high moral principles. Jerry Helzer was an insurance agent, an experienced guide and rafting instructor, but most importantly, devout Mormon. His wife Karma was a physical therapist but spent most of her time keeping house. The family moved often, eventually settling in Martinez, a cozy town 50 minutes from San Francisco, California. Glenn Taylor Helzer was born on July 26, 1917. From the beginning, became the family favorite. The boy was bright, charming, and attractive, and it seemed that family life revolved around him. From early childhood, everyone called him by his middle name, Taylor. Not only his parents, but also religious leaders of the Mormon Church predicted a great future of the boy, who easily memorized and quoted the Book of Mormon. Justin Allen Helzer was born 2 years later, on February 12, 1972. The boy grew up shy and timid. He seemed clumsy compared to his sociable and charismatic brother. Despite the fact that Justin and a daughter named Heather were growing up in the family, the mother always treated her eldest son specially. She singled out Taylor and believed in his exceptionalism. While Taylor made countless friends at school, Justin had almost none. He was painfully shy around girls and tried not to stand out in class. This became somewhat difficult when he began towering over his classmates by a head. Besides his height, there was one more thing that made Justin unique: absolute obedience. Once Taylor told his brother, "I'm number one and you're number two." Over time, Justin got used to his background role. He seemed to even need someone to direct his actions, and most often it was his brother. At 17, Taylor decided to drop out of college and join the National Guard in Texas. He wasn't ready for his squad mates to drink, swear, and chase women. Taylor lectured them that they had strayed from the path. His fellow recruits weren't offended because Taylor was quite charming and persuasive. People might not have liked his beliefs, but they liked Taylor himself. After serving in the National Guard, Taylor decided to go on a mission. Typically, Mormon young men and women are sent to another area or country where they pair up with a companion or preach about the Book of Mormon and the Church of Latter-day Saints. Arriving in Brazil, 19-year-old Taylor enthusiastically took up preaching. He made great progress. The young man was captivating and gathered crowds of listeners. Over time, Taylor developed almost a mania for reading and interpreting scripture. Sometimes he stayed up all night reading text from the Book of Mormon and pondering what was written there. He spent hours making entries in his diary, trying to decipher messages beyond the superficial meaning. This led the young man to some strange interpretations, which his mission companions noticed. They told him he was going too far, but Taylor already believed he was a step above everyone else, and his understanding could access what others couldn't see. There were many people in the Helzer circle who had an apocalyptic view of life in general. Taylor not only thought about catastrophic end-time events, but often went to survival camp. As he believed that apocalyptic catastrophes would one day occur, modern technologies would disappear, and in this great cosmic battle between good and evil, people would have to survive on their own. He imagined that the church would divide into groups led by warrior prophets who would protect their flock. These warriors should preserve the faith, practicing survival skills, and fighting the forces of darkness. The landscape would be a mix of the Book of Revelation, chaos, and Mad Max-style settings. Even then, Taylor came to the idea that the paradigm of good and evil was something brought to us by the devil. To be saved, one had to reject this concept, a kind of Buddhist view of Christianity. Not surprisingly, not everyone shared his ideas. Taylor Helzer returned from Brazil somewhat disappointed. He found it difficult to communicate with people who saw things differently than he did. If someone disagreed with his point of view, the young preacher became irritated and offended. Despite his struggle with faith and doctrine, Taylor found time for romance. When he entered a room, all attention focused on him, a charismatic and strong personality. He was somewhat domineering, stubborn, and very self-confident, but with women he seemed gentle and flirtatious. During conversation, Taylor always looked directly into a girl's eyes, captivating her with the speeches and manners. He accidentally met Anne, whom he knew from high school, at a movie theater a month after returning from his mission. Since Anne wasn't a Mormon, he convinced her to join the Church of Latter-day Saints. Despite the premonition of apocalypse, Taylor and Anne married in April 1993, but this union was doomed to fail. The couple turned to a marriage counselor soon after their honeymoon. Taylor had problems adhering to his own ideals. After moving away from his parents, he started watching cable television for the first time. Taylor could stay up all night, although he had to be at work by 6 in the morning. He couldn't tear himself away from adult channels. Taylor dreamed of repeating what he saw in porn films and constantly persuaded his wife. But for Anne, this was uncomfortable or unacceptable. They constantly argued. Even the birth of 2 daughters didn't help. On the contrary, there were even more reasons for disputes, as they now arose in matters of raising children. Anne's uncle worked in a financial conglomerate that managed several brokerage branches. In 1993, the man agreed to show Taylor the intricacies of the company's work and hired him as a financial consultant. Although Taylor had studied at college for only 1 semester, he seemed made for the job of a broker. He had a charm, ambition, and a talent for sales. His list of clients whose funds ranged from a few thousand to millions of dollars grew to about 200 people. Taylor was genuinely interested in helping these people manage their money wisely. And while Taylor's star was rising, Justin remained almost a ghost in the family. His mother, Karma, seemed to have poured all her love into Taylor, leaving nothing for her second son. Without a compass in life, Justin did everything his brother did. Taylor went to the National Guard. Justin did the same. His service coincided with the Gulf War years. Justin became a military policeman. With his fellow servicemen, he was always polite, didn't drink, didn't swear, avoided conversation about sex. In the Guard, Justin learned to handle weapons. Returning home from service, he was still open, trusting, and naive. Justin finished college and became an art specialist. In the summer of 1996, Anne and Taylor's marriage was heading to disaster. The young preacher began to think that the Church of Latter-day Saints had lied to him. He believed he had followed all the rules but hadn't become happy in his career, marriage, or life. Taylor saw the cause as the modern church moving away from the founder's concepts. He suddenly wanted to experience the sinful side of life. Taylor began drinking, smoking, and visiting nightclubs, very un-Mormon actives. It was a kind of provocation to see how the church and God would treat him. He grew his hair long, bathed less often, and wore only dark clothes. Friends noticed the strangeness and changes in Taylor. Some no longer wanted to associate with him. He was excommunicated from the church congregation, but Taylor continued to immerse himself in a seductive, sinful life, losing his sense of shame and guilt, convinced that God had some plan for him. He began experimenting with drugs, marijuana, cocaine, mushrooms, and ecstasy. Taylor felt he had missed something in his youth, so he wanted to try and experience everything. His behavior began to resemble that of a 15-year-old teenager. He could be away from home for weeks, and his wife no longer trusted him with the children. Additionally, Taylor had numerous mistresses. While her son was torn by existential questions, Karma Helzer took a course called Harmony and recommended it to Taylor and Justin. In the 1990s, Harmony and similar courses were very popular. They were conducted by Impact Training, an organization resembling a cult whose members claimed that by following their teachings, you would improve your relationships, unlock your true potential, cure incurable diseases, gain wealth, and much more. There were several levels. They were conducted by organizers who established psychological control over participants. Most often, it looked like this. People were gathered in a hall where bright lights shone and mystical music played quietly. The room temperature was low, the room was soundproofed, there were no windows. For 4 long days, people were given almost no sleep, fed candy and water, could only go to the bathroom with permission, were accompanied there, and never left alone. Since many people became sick, garbage cans for vomiting were placed throughout the room. The training was conducted by a facilitator, an extremely totalitarian personality. He had a sonorous voice and unwavering self-confidence. His overseers were called angels. The rest were simply called trainees, or given nicknames instead of names, often offensive ones. If a person resisted what was required of them, the facilitator would scream and humiliate them. And if the trainee didn't comply, they were expelled from the course, which was considered the greatest failure. Overall, the process was exhausting both physically and mentally. The key was being in a large group. In fact, it's the same mechanism that makes movies more exciting with a crowd on premiere day than watching alone. This was a typical emotionally manipulative tactic for cult-like organizations. There were many games, such as the pity party, where the group had to laugh at and mock anyone who tried to evoke sympathy. Sexual assault victims were humiliated and called sluts. Overweight women were forced to wear cow costumes and wear belts around their necks. It was believed that you needed to hate yourself until you learned to love. The philosophy of courses like Harmony was destroy a person's old beliefs, break them morally and spiritually to rebuild anew. After such courses, a person viewed the world through a prism of this training. Impressionable people perceived it as a life-changing event or a consciousness experience. Trainees were taught that there is no right and wrong and there are no victims. The main concept was the word choice and result. You choose to do something and then you had to accept the result, good or bad. For example, leaders claimed that if you got on a plane that crashed, you weren't a victim because you made a conscious choice to fly on that flight. One of the practices of Harmony was the game called lifeboat. Participants imagined that they were on a ship about to sink. The lifeboat had room for only 3 people. Who would be saved and who would die? You had to beg other participants to save your life, tell them why you wanted to be saved, convince others that you should leave. Each participant was given 3 popsicle sticks. You could give them to those you wanted to save. Some gave all 3, sacrificing themselves, but most people kept 1 stick for themselves. It is unknown whether the Helzer brothers tried to save themselves in this game, but one thing is certain: Taylor was fascinated by the power and strength the facilitator possessed. He himself wanted to become one someday. The courses taught that right and wrong were belief systems that slow down a person's self-development. They emphasized the importance of the individual rather than the group or social interaction. This only strengthened Taylor's already inflated view of himself as a leader who carried an important message for others. Similar spiritual groups, as he soon realized, shared a simple tactic. They required their followers to suspend critical thinking, and Taylor decided to test this on an impressionable young woman from Southern California. Carrie Farman had been a beauty since the day she was born. However, she grew up in a troubled family and left home as a young girl. Carrie moved to the San Francisco Bay Area and, to support herself, sold perfumes and worked in a veterinary office. In 1998, 21-year-old Carrie began working as a waitress at a restaurant in Concord and one evening served an attractive young man. His name was Taylor Helzer. They started chatting. At the end of the meal, instead of a tip, the young man left his credit card on the table and told the waitress to buy herself something nice. Carrie was amazed by this gesture. The girl didn't use the credit card, but called the mysterious guy. A romance began between Taylor and Carrie. Despite the fact that Taylor was still married to Anne, the couple began living together on Oak Grove Road in Concord. Soon Justin moved in with them. In 1999, Taylor decided to quit his broker job, but not simply resign. He began asking friends how to deceive the financial company by simulating a mental illness and getting insurance. Taylor persuaded Carrie to help him by confirming that he was exhibiting serious behavioral problems. Before going to see the psychiatrist, Taylor didn't shower or shave for several days, and once in the office, he rambled about his wild ideas and experiences. He admitted that he had started taking methamphetamine to silence the voices in his head. When Carrie brought him to the hospital for another session, Taylor hid in the bushes and refused to come out, claiming dangerous guys were hunting him. Another time, he complained about sleepwalking. Before sessions, Helzer would use a combination of drugs and alcohol and quickly convince doctors he was mentally ill. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder with manic and psychotic features. After going through Harmony, Taylor had his own plans for America. And now living on medical insurance checks, he could devote all his time to this activity. He convinced Carrie to go through Harmony as well, after which the girl took out a loan, borrowed money from acquaintances, and got breast augmentation. Carrie sent photos of her updated nude body to Playboy, and the magazine was impressed. Carrie began a successful modeling career under the pseudonym Carrie Affair. Later, she would be offered to become Miss Fall 2000. The Playboy article would describe Carrie as something between Pamela Anderson and Claudia Schiffer. Although there were 3 to 6 people living in the Oak Grove Road house at different times, it was definitely Taylor's dwelling. He outlined the house rules in what he called the 12 Principles of Magic. He wrote them on the back of a psychedelic poster and hung it on the wall for all to see. Justin led his quiet ascetic existence. He always ate and went to bed at the same time. He didn't watch TV and only occasionally listened to radio in his room. If Justin was needed, he was either doing yoga and meditation or at work. Sometimes he visited gothic clubs. But Justin had his own oddities that everyone who knew him noticed. He exercised daily. His exercises were yoga-like and very physically intense, almost in the realm of martial arts. When he did these exercises, he loudly grunted, moaned, and swore. Justin was also obsessively concerned with nutrition and his health, eating only organic foods. He wouldn't even try store-bought cookies. His eating habits frightened people. Justin ate like an animal, making smacking sounds, food smeared across his face, running down his chin. Once they had a female acquaintance named Sarah visiting, who walked into the kitchen to find Justin on all fours eating from a plate on the floor. But it wasn't this that ruined Sarah's opinion of Justin. Upon learning that the girl thought of him only as a friend, Justin said, "I was only friends with you to sleep with you." Another time, he told the girl he had gotten a piercing and offered to show her. Before Sarah could answer, Justin pulled down his pants and exposed his penis. There was no piercing there. Taylor began selling drugs at parties and introduced his girlfriend Carrie to the rave scene and ecstasy. He began creating numerous schemes for how to make money for his life mission, which he called the transformation of America. The powerful religious organization was conceived as a club for the rich and famous, with himself at the helm. Taylor endlessly repeated that his life's mission was to influence America by spreading love throughout it. But Taylor's vision of love resembled an entertaining porn attraction, a sex Disneyland of sorts. Over time, his ideas began to form into the Intimacy Project. If you say this phrase quickly, it sounded like intimacy. The project was essentially conceived as a high-class escort service. The same was true of the Kitten Club. Taylor planned to recruit attractive girls who would provide sexual services to wealthy men, then blackmail these people and extort money from them. And the first was his girlfriend, Carrie. As his ideas became increasingly grandiose, Taylor persuaded Carrie to dance striptease in a club in San Francisco. Afterward, he wanted her to conduct private dance sessions with men and then have sex with them. After all, in Harmony, they were taught that there is no such thing as right and wrong. The main thing is the result, that is money. Taylor wanted to start a merciless crusade against the leaders of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Either due to excessive drugs or bouts of insanity, he became absolutely maniacal about it. He talked about the transformation of America with Carrie, Justin, and others for hours, to the point of nausea. When others didn't understand what he was talking about or disagreed with him, Taylor became enraged. He was untamable. He was high. Carrie used ecstasy and weed. The only sober person in the house was Justin. One of Taylor's get-rich-quick schemes was methamphetamine production. One day, Carrie came home and found that their garage had been equipped as a meth lab. The girl was furious, but it didn't matter. Taylor ruled. He gathered all the ingredients for production except red phosphorus. The drug operation apparently failed and Taylor remained on the dealer list. The number 3 became almost sacred for Taylor. It had echoes of the Trinity, the 3 wise men, and other connotations. Taylor wanted Justin and Carrie to become his main people who he could unconditionally trust to carry out his orders, his apostles. But over time, Taylor began to exclude Carrie from his plans. He became even angrier with his girlfriend when she refused to dance at the club. Carrie doubted his wild plans and decided to continue her modeling career, which would have nothing to do with sex clubs, 12 principles of magic, or transforming America into a porn attraction. In 1999, Carrie packed her things and set off to conquer Southern California. Taylor was even glad to throw her out of his inner circle. It was quite obvious that Carrie wasn't suitable for the role of the second apostle. He needed someone who would truly believe in him and his visions, someone who would accept him as a prophet, realize with soul and heart that he was blessed by God. Taylor decided it would be a person devoid of attractive appearance, charm, or ambition, whose self-esteem wouldn't allow them to leave his influence. He needed someone vulnerable, someone like Don Godman. When Don began closely communicating with Taylor, he persuaded her to take the Harmony course. He motivated all his friends to take such courses to check how suggestible they were. Later, Dawn described her experience. We began to judge people and build barriers as children. With Harmony, you return to being a child, without barriers. Nothing matters. For example, in childhood, a spider crawled on my foot. It scared me, so all spiders became bad. But that's not true. Spiders have their place in the world. The purpose of the course was for a person to come out of it without fixed values, which Dawn successfully realized. As Taylor promised, the 2 levels of courses she took led Dawn to believe that right and wrong don't exist. Taylor told Dawn that she didn't need the 3rd level. Now he would become her personal facilitator. She would benefit more by listening to Taylor and reading books he recommended. Dawn read various literature and then discussed it with Taylor, told him about her life. They could sit on the couch for hours. He held her hands and looked into her eyes. Later, she said, "He gave me what I never had before. With him, it was safe. I could freely tell him about my dreams. He made me feel special. I realized that there was a purpose in my life. I came to believe that he was a prophet of God, a seer and revelator. He communicated directly with God. Everything he said was truth." It's not unlikely that Dawn was also flattered by Taylor's attention and found him sexually attractive. Over time, Justin also became more talkative with Dawn. He told her about his life in the Mormon Church and other religions he had studied. He was particularly intrigued by Buddhism, reincarnation, and certain dietary regimens. If Taylor preached, taught, and converted for his projects, Justin looked inward. He kept a personal diary. In it, he listed his 3 main goals for the year: to become an instigator, a sexual giant, a druid. He was inspired to become a druid by the game Dungeons & Dragons. He and Taylor once played for 25 hours without a break. In his diary, Justin wrote about transforming food into pure energy. He was obsessed with creating the perfect body and took his meditations and exercises to the extreme. He also wrote in detail about how to become a good lover, but returned to one sad fact: he didn't have a girlfriend and was desperate to find one. Over time, Taylor began to convince Justin and Dawn that the transformation of America was the beginning of the times of Christ's return to earth. The days of apocalypse prophecies from Bible were already coming true. He reasoned a lot and poetically, but there was one problem. Taylor needed money. Lots of money. This problem was previously partially solved by Justin, but banks stopped giving credit when his debt exceeded $30,000. Now, Taylor had other plans for which he smoothly prepared his followers. He gave his followers the feeling of being in the company of angels, a sense of protection, a sense of security. Like you're a child being held in someone's arms, Dawn said. When the planning of kidnappings and murders began, Dawn and Justin no longer saw anything wrong with it. They had a prophet, and they were his apostles, his warriors of light. Their lives had meaning. In the Holy Gospel of Mark, Christ calls his apostles, the brothers James and John, sons of thunder. Taylor began calling himself, Dawn and Justin, children of thunder. Taylor instilled in his flock that God's law is above human laws. He said that in some cases the Lord accepts murder. For example, in the Bible there is the story of Solomon and King Agag. There is the story of Nephi in the Book of Mormon. The transformation of America was a way to bring love and harmony to the world, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And if for the happiness of all mankind a few lives need to be sacrificed, well, so be it. Now all Taylor needed was a suitable person who could be sacrificed for his grandiose plans. He chose a young woman named Selena Bishop, the daughter of an American blues legend. Alvin Bishop began playing blues guitar when he was a college student in Chicago in the early 60s. He was a member of the Butterfield Blues Band, but eventually went solo, maintaining the style and sometimes mixing blues with elements of country and western. Alvin and his wife Jennifer lived the life of rock musicians. There was nothing unusual for them about coming home at 2 or 3 in the morning after a show and discussing music until dawn. And even when their daughter Selena was born in 1977, the Bishop's home remained unusual. Alvin led a nightlife and usually didn't get out of bed before 3 in the afternoon. Despite his love for his daughter, their relationship became increasingly complex over time. Eventually, when Selena was 3, the marriage fell apart. After separating from Alvin Bishop, Jennifer Villarine and Selena moved around a lot. They chose Marin County, falling in love with the forest and ocean. They stayed with various friends and lived in a mobile home for some time. 22-year-old Selena and 45-year-old Jennifer were more like friends than mother and daughter. They really enjoyed each other's company. Jennifer Villarine made ends meet working as a cleaner, waitress, and nanny. She also created jewelry from semi-precious stones. Soon she met James Gamble. Over time, James became her very good friend. He treated Selena like everyone around him with kindness and understanding. To get on her feet in Marin County, Selena got a job as a waitress at a Two-Bird Cafe. She took graphic design classes and even did screen printing with Alvin Bishop album covers. She was proud of her father and got along well with him. Selena also spent a lot of time with friends. In April 2000, the girl went to an underground rave where she bought ecstasy from an unusual dealer. The guy stood out. He wasn't dressed in bright clothes, but all in black, was very tall and thin, and tied his long hair in a ponytail. Selena was very attracted to this man. He introduced himself as Jordan. Selena fell head over heels in love with Jordan and began dating him. She knew it wasn't his real name, but this added mystery appealed to him. She talked a lot about her new boyfriend to friends, although he revealed little about himself. From Selena's side, it was something like puppy love. The girl was a bit naive in her feelings and sincerely believed she had met the love of her life. Selena began spending every free minute with Jordan. It seemed that her life was improving. She even decided to get her own place in Marin County and, for the first time, rented a studio apartment separate from her mother. Unfortunately, Selena didn't know she was just an instrument in Taylor Helzer's plan. He made up an incredible story for her that he was going to receive a lot of money from his great-uncle and didn't want his ex-wife to find out. Taylor wanted Selena to open a bank account and he could deposit his $125,000 there. She would receive a substantial percentage from each transaction. All he needed was her agreement, and Taylor got it. Selena didn't hide from friends that she was in love with Jordan and that he was receiving an inheritance from his great-uncle. She would get $25,000 if she helped him hide $125,000 from his ex-wife. The money would allow them to live together. Friends weren't thrilled with this scheme, but Selena was happy and didn't want to listen to anyone. Dawn and Justin also met Selena and already understood that she was to be sacrificed for the great cause. However, whether Selena herself agreed to give her life for the Children of Thunder, no one asked her. Taylor created a plan to kidnap 5 people. They would get information about their monetary assets, transfer them to another person's account, and that person would give the money to Taylor. According to the plan, 5 people had to be killed, and then the person who opened the account. The account holder became Selena Bishop. It remained to choose people who owned stocks and funds. In April 2000, Taylor Helzer decided that the Children of Thunder needed a house. Since he wasn't working, Justin and Dawn would have to pay the bills, but Taylor had such a strong hold over them that this wasn't a problem. Saddlewood Court was located in a picturesque suburb of Concord at the foot of Mount Diablo. The bungalow was to be not only their living space but also the starting point for all of Taylor's plans. Taylor told Justin they needed a gun. On May 5, 2000, Justin purchased a semi-automatic Beretta and ammunition at a gun store. Justin showed his driver's license and army documents but gave the seller his old address. On June 6th, a woman calling herself Sky Anderson bought a reciprocating saw and blades for it at a store. Later, she purchased a stun gun online. The Children of Thunder bought pagers to keep in touch with each other and set up voicemail. Taylor also gave Selena a pager. On July 10th, Taylor, Justin, and Dawn took 3 dogs from a shelter, a Rottweiler, a Border Collie, and an Australian Shepherd. The dogs were a part of Taylor's plan. He wanted to know if they would eat human remains. For some reason, they abandoned the idea. The dogs were released in a deserted place and never seen again. Only the Rottweiler, Jake, remained. Dawn began building a dog area in the backyard of their residence. She hammered nails and said words. The neighbors were outraged by the noise. They were also scared by the huge vicious dog that jumped at the fence when someone approached. The Children of Thunder held daily meetings at Saddlewood Court. The 3 would sit in a circle and open the meeting with prayer. Later, Dawn said, "We as Children of Thunder believed that we were declaring war on Satan. This needed to be done so that Satan wouldn't get the opportunity to be admitted to Earth. Satan was evil, as were his missions. He was the opposite of God. God is pure joy, but Satan was balance." Taylor said that if it weren't for Satan, Adam and Eve would never have had sex and the Earth would have remained uninhabited. Satan played an important role in the world's development. At these meetings, Taylor expressed his other ideas. He believed that Mormons had strayed from the path, so he devised a scheme called Brazil, whereby he would adopt Brazilian orphans and bring them to the States. Here Taylor would turn the orphans into killers who unconditionally carried out his orders. They would go on a mission to kidnap the LDS church leadership. Chaos would engulf the United States and Taylor would become the unifying force of the Mormon Church. Justin and Dawn would form a new hierarchy and elect 12 new apostles, and the previous church leadership would have to be killed. All for the salvation of the world. Brazil, however, was the future. Days of Thunder came first. Taylor was becoming more and more maniacal. He used methamphetamine and talked very much and for long periods. All three switched to mission preparation mode. Don bought handcuffs and leg shackles at an adult store. The saleswoman was surprised that the young woman took the shackles but didn't take the keys because once the handcuffs are locked on a person, it will be impossible to remove them without a key. Jesus began approaching when he was 30. Joseph Smith founded the first Mormon church at 30. Therefore, Taylor decided that everything would begin on July 30, 2000 after his 30th birthday. That morning, all three sat in a circle and prayed. Taylor, Don, and Justin declared war on Satan. The Children of Thunder weren't a group of three people. Taylor always found time to charm impressionable women. One of his followers was a single mother and self-proclaimed witch, Deborah McClanahan. In the afternoon of July 30, Dawn Godman appeared at Deborah's apartment. She asked her friend to buy 4 adult movie tickets in the evening, order 4 meals at a restaurant, and keep the receipts. All this was to be their alibi. Dawn left Deborah a $100 bill for tickets and dinner. McClanahan assumed that Taylor was going to make a drug deal and needed backup. She had no idea it was something much more disgusting. Taylor decided their targets would be elderly people. He planned to give the victims a lethal dose of Rohypnol, the so-called date rape drug. Just in case, however, both Taylor and Justin decided to take briefcases containing guns, stun guns, handcuffs, leg shackles, and even a small blowtorch. Bob White was one of Taylor's wealthiest broker clients and lived in an ideal place for abduction, deserted and quiet. Justin and Taylor drove to White's in Walnut Creek in a Saturn, and Dawn followed them in Justin's pickup. She had a bucket in her car in case the Helzers needed to urinate. They didn't want to leave DNA. Dressed in business suits and carrying briefcases, Taylor and Justin approached White's door. Taylor had a cover story prepared, and once he and Justin got inside, the man's life would last only until he signed checks in Selena Bishop's name. But White wasn't home. He was in another state. Number 2 of Taylor's list of former clients were the Steinmans, and unfortunately for them, they were at home that evening. Ivan and Annette Steinman were born in the Midwest and moved to California with their parents in the 1930s. They met during World War II and married in 1945. They had 2 daughters, Nancy and Judy. Ivan was quiet and thoughtful. In his free time, he liked to tinker around the house and yard, doing carpentry. His wife was more socially active. They were a well-matched couple who complemented each other. Working hard, the couple saved a decent sum. They also invested their money, and Taylor Helzer was their financial consultant. They had a good relationship with this young man. On July 30, 2000, Ivan and Annette Steinman spent time at a restaurant with their friends. For them, it was just another warm, lazy Sunday. It turned into evening, and around 8 o'clock, there was a ring at the door. A neighbor later told police he saw 2 young men in dark suits with briefcases approach the Steinman's house. One of them stopped and seemed hesitant to go further. Then the one with lighter hair stood in front of the dark-haired one and put his hand on his shoulder. He made a gesture with his head toward the Steinman's door as if saying, "Come on, come on." Strangely enough, it was Justin Helzer who indicated to Taylor that they needed to put their plan into action. Thinking they were missionaries, the neighbor moved away from the window. What's known for certain is what Nancy Hall chose exactly the moment when the Helzer brothers appeared at the Steinman's house to call her parents. Annette was usually very cheerful and talkative on the phone, but not this time. In sharp tone, as if she'd just been interrupted in something important, Annette told her daughter, "We're not alone here," and hung up. Meanwhile, Dawn Godman was waiting for the brothers to return in the pickup, smoking one cigarette after another. She felt she was being watched. She was right. Neighbors remembered the suspicious woman. The brothers probably thought they wouldn't be noticed when they brought the statements to their residence, but their neighbor was also watching from the window. She saw Taylor and Justin lead an elderly couple into the house. The man in white shirt and gold-rimmed glasses was taking tiny steps as if reluctant to go. In the house, Ivan and Annette Steinman were handcuffed and seated on the couch. Everything that happened next is known from Don Godman's words. Justin sat across from the captives in the chair with a loaded gun. He didn't make a sound while Taylor wouldn't stop talking. He had been under the influence of methamphetamine for the past week. The Steinmans tried to remain calm. Don and Taylor separated them into different rooms. The couple was asked questions about family financial data, and the answers were recorded. Then Taylor and Don compared their notes. Since the answers were identical, they became convinced the Steinmans weren't lying to them. Taylor brought a mattress into the living room and told Ivan and Annette to lie on it. He tried to convince the elderly couple that he needed money to flee town. Once he was gone, they would be released. The next morning, July 31st, Taylor ordered Dawn to call the investment company and pretend to be Annette Steinman. She said she needed money for medical expenses, so she was asking to liquidate all her long-term investments and funds. She was warned this was very disadvantageous, but Dawn insisted, imitating an elderly woman's voice. Although the company thought the situation was strange, the need to cater to the client's wishes was paramount, and the transactions began to go through. After 3 hours, all stocks were transferred to a money market fund. In this case, they could be withdrawn in cash. Annette Steinman's capital amounted to $167,000. Taylor took Ivan to a phone booth so the man could cancel some appointments and leave a message for his daughter Nancy not to worry. Dawn went for coffee for herself and the captives. For some reason, at this point, Taylor decided to give Ivan and Annette 6 Rohypnol tablets each. The Steinmans began to fall asleep. The elderly couple, in a semi-conscious state, were forced to write 2 checks in Selena Bishop's name. The captives were no longer needed. Justin Helzer hoped that the Rohypnol would simply make Ivan and Annette die in their sleep. He didn't want them to suffer, but Taylor had other plans. He woke the elderly couple and told them to say goodbye to each other before he said goodbye to them. Why he did this is unknown, but it greatly upset Justin. Steinmans were dragged to the bathroom. Taylor stripped down to his underwear and ordered Justin and Dawn to do the same. Taylor decided to strangle the elderly couple. He placed his hands over Annette's nose and mouth, but she only fought back more fiercely. The same happened with Ivan. Tired of the struggle, Taylor ordered Dawn to bring 2 large pieces of plastic and threw one over Annette's face and handed the second to Justin. But even these didn't work. The victims resisted furiously. In desperation, Taylor began hitting Annette's head against the tile floor and the toilet rim. Justin was beating Ivan, but this didn't kill the Steinmans. Dawn stood in the bathroom doorway saying to herself, come on, just die already so it can all be over." While Justin was banging Ivan's head against the floor, he stopped showing signs of life. The man died of heart attack. But with Annette, things were much worse. Tired of the struggle, Taylor dragged the woman into the bathtub, turned her on her side and stabbed her twice in the lungs, but even this didn't kill her. And then Taylor slit the woman's throat. He pressed her head face down so the victim would choke on her own blood. Finally, after incredibly brutal violence, Annette Steinman's suffering ended. Taylor and Justin lined the bathroom with plastic and got to work. Very soon it became obvious to them that dismemberment, like murder, wasn't such a simple matter. The brothers had to first cut through the flesh with knives and only after that saw through the bones with the saw. The bathroom looked like a slaughterhouse. The dismembered bodies were placed in plastic garbage bags and stacked on a tarp in the hallway. By 2000, Vicky Sexton had worked as a bank manager in various branches for almost 30 years, but until August 1st, she had never seen such an extravagant outfit in refined Walnut Creek. The client was wearing a lime green pantsuit complemented by a large white cowboy hat, sunglasses, and gloves. The client was a young blonde woman who moved in a wheelchair. The woman said her name was Jackie. Dawn, which was her, began telling Vicky a convoluted story about her bank's clients, Ivan and Annette Stayman, and their granddaughter, Selena Bishop, who needed urgent medical care. The Staymans were going to pay for Selena's open-heart surgery, and for this they needed to deposit money into her account. Dawn handed Vicky Sexton 2 checks with the Staymans' signatures for $67,000 and $33,000. Killing the Staymans was a premature measure. The sum was substantial, and Vicky decided to talk to the account holders. She called the phone number printed on the checks, but she was greeted by an answering machine. Dawn hadn't expected this and got nervous. The bank employee also needed the Stainman's social security numbers. Dawn replied she would find out, and with these words wheeled her wheelchair out of the bank through the front door. Vicky thought this was very strange because 16 steps awaited the client outside. Visitors in wheelchairs usually went down to the parking lot by elevator. When Vicky Sexton arrived at work on the morning of August 2nd, a message awaited her that someone had called and left the Stainman's social security numbers for her. After a while, Jackie called. She wanted to know about the funds that should be deposited into Selena Bishop's account. Vicky again expressed a desire to speak with the Stainmans personally. Dawn huffed and complained that they weren't around, which was untrue. They were packed in bags at her house. Vicky Sexton transferred the money to the account but went upstairs to the security department and ordered them to hold the checks in Selena Bishop's name pending verification. On August 1st, 2000, Dawn rented a 3-seater jet ski. It was almost like a small speedboat. It was already dark outside when the jet ski was placed in Justin's trailer. It was noticeable how deeply in love Selena was, but she didn't feel confident and was self-conscious about her weight, especially when she learned that Jordan's ex-girlfriend was a Playboy model. Jennifer was curious to learn about this mysterious Jordan, whom her daughter was dating. But he didn't appear, and Selena made excuses for him. Jenny only saw the man once briefly when he helped move her daughter's things to her new apartment. This moment would cost Jennifer Villarin her life. Jordan invited Selena on a hike in Yosemite National Park. She was in love and very excited. In her personal diary, the girl wrote that she would like to spend more time with Jordan and wondered why he only gave her crumbs of his time. But Selena still believed she had found her soulmate and was in state of bliss. The girl didn't want a fancy house, expensive cars, didn't want a lifestyle associated with drugs. All she wanted was an ordinary life with children, a cozy home, and Jordan. She planned to lose weight to become more attractive to him. And Taylor planned to take Selena to Yosemite and kill her there as soon as the money was transferred to her bank account. He didn't know that Vicky Sexton had held the checks, and he was worried. Bank employees could call Selena Bishop at any moment, and this simpleton would say that the Stainmans weren't her relatives, and she knew nothing about the money. Such a situation had to be avoided at all costs. On top of everything, he planned to sell drugs at the Reggae on the River event. Therefore, Taylor decided that everything would be over for Selena before his departure. On August 1st, he called the girl and invited her to a bar. Afterward, Taylor suggested Selena spend the night at his place so they could leave for the Yosemite early the next morning. Selena had never been to Saddlewood Court before. She and Taylor arrived at the Children of Thunder's house at dusk in separate cars. A neighbor noticed a dark-haired young woman approach Taylor in the driveway and kiss him. Then they entered the house. No one saw the girl again. Taylor, Justin, Dawn, and Selena played a game in the living room for some time. Everyone except Justin smoked marijuana. Dawn lured Selena into the bathroom and Justin stood behind with a hammer, but the future victim never turned her back to him, so everyone returned to the game. Taylor brought wine for everyone. He slipped her hypnol into Selena's glass, but the girl noticed something floating in her wine, another failure. Taylor volunteered to bring her another glass. He spread a blanket on the living room floor and suggested Selena lie on it. Taylor began massaging the girl's shoulders and back, and at this time Justin approached and struck her on the head with a hammer with all his might. Selena didn't lose consciousness but tried to shield herself with her hands, as it would later turn out that the blow broke her finger. Justin hit Selena on the head 5 more times. Dawn watched the murder. The man carried Selena's lifeless body to the kitchen. Taylor told Dawn to clean the blood from the carpet, while he and Justin went to the bathroom to prepare for the next part of the plan. At this moment, something unexpected happened. Dawn heard Selena groan. She was still alive. Dawn continued scrubbing the carpet. Taylor entered the kitchen. With the words, "Sorry, Selena," he hit her with a hammer at least 3 more times. The groans subsided. Justin and Taylor put a plastic garbage bag over the upper part of Selena's body so that blood wouldn't spread, and carried the body to the bathroom, lifted Selena's head by the hair and slit her throat. From the amount of blood spilled, experts would conclude that despite all the hammer blows to the head, the girl was still alive until that moment. That's when Dawn first seriously feared Taylor. She ran to the living room to scrub blood from the carpet and heard the reciprocating saw start up in the bathroom and body parts throbbing as they fell into the bathtub. The children of Thunder's neighbors, a married couple, couldn't sleep. Terrible noise, hammering, and sawing came from Saddlewood Court, and at some point the woman said to her husband, "Are they breaking bones in there?" Dawn put the handcuffs and hammer in the dishwasher. Taylor thoroughly cleaned the bathroom after the dismemberment. It would later turn out that he went over every square inch of the bathroom with a toothbrush. Experts wouldn't be able to find a drop of blood there. Taylor couldn't remove only the blood that had seeped under the handles of the cold and hot water. But he noticed this and sat down to the store to buy a new faucet. Since Selena's car was still parked at the house, Justin drove it away and abandoned it at a nearby shopping mall. Taylor wanted to see if the Rottweiler Jake would eat human flesh, so he cut off a piece of skin with Selena's tattoo and offered it to the dog. The dog ate the gruesome treat. It was decided to burn Selena's clothes in the fireplace. The lights in the house were turned off, only the fiery glimmers flickered. It was a projection of a scene from hell, with the shadows dancing on the walls and with Selena's blood, which Dawn still couldn't scrub from the carpet. Taylor worried that Selena's mom, Jennifer, knew what he looked like. From Selena's words, he knew that the mother would be looking after her apartment while they were on the trip. There was an illogicality in Taylor's schemes, and a bright mania could be traced, possibly due to drugs. But it no longer seemed strange to him to eliminate Selena's mother as well. He didn't want anyone to able to connect him with Jordan. For this purpose, he took 2 guns and went on a mission with Dawn while Justin stayed home. They didn't know that Jennifer Villarine had a guest that night, 54-year-old Jim Gamble. Jim wasn't even planning to spend the night at Jenny's on August 2nd. They spent some time with friends, and as it was getting late and Jim had drunk a little, he decided not to return to Yountville to his mother. Jenny offered him to spend the night in Selena's apartment in Woodacre while she was away, and James agreed. When Taylor got out of the car at the house where Selena lived, he had a gun in his hand. He headed up the hill in the darkness. Large trees cast shadows on the yard. Dawn waited in the car, and seconds seemed like an eternity to her. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by gunshots. Selena rented the lower floor of a house from the Solday couple who lived on the 2nd floor. The husband and wife woke up from the noise. With incredible bravery, Jay Soldi went downstairs armed only with a flashlight and a mobile phone. At this time, another neighbor called 911 and reported gunshots. Soldi made his way through the garage to Selena's door. A couple of minutes later, he rushed back to his wife, screaming, "There are 2 corpses down there." Soon, a sheriff's patrol car parked nearby. One of the officers later recounted, "The door only opened halfway. I saw a human hand blocking the door. There was blood on the carpet. It was a male victim. A female victim was lying on the bed face up. The depression near her head was filling with blood. As soon as I entered, I tried to help the victims. I checked their pulse. The injured man was making gargling sounds, but it was the blood coming out of his throat making the sound. They were both dead." Taylor had a new idea. Since the bodies were still lying in their house, he decided to remove the teeth from the heads of Ivan, Annette, and Selena. This would make identifying these remains difficult if they were found at all. Justin took out the 3 heads and placed them on a towel. Don held them while he knocked out teeth from the upper and lower jaws using a chisel and hammer. The whole process took at least 30 minutes. They placed the teeth and jaw bones in plastic bags, and the battered heads were packaged separately. The remains of Ivan, Annette, and Selena were mixed together to further confuse identification, or at least so Taylor thought. On Thursday, August 3rd, the Children of Thunder headed toward the Delta with a jet ski on a trailer and 9 sports bags full of body parts. The bags also contained steps from the yard of Saddlewood Court to use as weights. The Children of Thunder simply brought out the bags with bodies in broad daylight and loaded them into Justin's pickup. To anyone who saw them, it seemed like the group was going on a hike. The jet ski in tow only reinforced this illusion. The company in Justin's pickup headed east to the tall Antioch Bridge across the wide San Joaquin River. They paid $2 and continued on their way. The trio turned south to a small dam. They scouted a section of road nearby where they could descend to the water's edge. While Taylor and Justin went up the Mokelumne River on the jet ski loaded with sports bags, Don waited on the shore in the pickup with the rest of the body parts and read a book. They were gone about 30 minutes before returning for the next batch of bags. Cruising the Delta took almost the whole day. Apparently, no one saw them throwing bags into the murky river waters. However, while studying God's laws, Taylor didn't bother to study the laws of chemistry. A few days later, when the decomposition process began and the remains started releasing gases, the bags floated to the surface. Taylor went to sell drugs at the reggae on the river rave and instructed Justin and Don to dispose of all evidence. They were to dump the Steinman's van in a rundown area of Oakland. With luck, it would be stolen. Don threw the Steinman's credit cards out the window along the way. If someone found them and used them illegally, it would further complicate the situation. Afterward, she retrieved Selena's car from the shopping center parking lot and drove it to another town, leaving Ivan Steinman's wedding ring in the car. On the way back, Justin and Dawn stopped by Deborah McClanahan's to borrow her steam cleaner. Dawn couldn't get rid of the smell in the house and didn't want to return there. Although she didn't want to admit it, the smell that haunted her was the smell of death. Dawn tried to clean the carpet of blood with the steam cleaner, but it didn't work. Household cleaning products still didn't completely remove the blood, leaving a pink stain on the carpet. Dawn and Justin finally decided they needed professional help. Justin began calling cleaning companies with the story that he had cut himself and stained the carpet. He tried to find out how quickly they could do the job. While Justin was arranging meetings with carpet cleaners, Dawn visited Deborah again. She had a wheeled suitcase with her. In it, Dawn transported a safe to her friends and also left the wheelchair in storage at her apartment. On Sunday afternoon, the cleaners got to work. They poured a special solution whose bubbles pushed dirt from the fabric to the surface. It was expected that when the solution dried, the blood could simply be removed. Blowers were installed to make the carpets dry faster. Toward evening, Taylor returned from Reggie on the river. All that was needed now was to cash the two checks for $100,000 and escape. Nancy Hall, Ivan and Annette Steinman's daughter, tried to call her parents on August 1st and 2nd, but without success. They usually told her if they planned to leave town. On August 3rd, Nancy went to her parents' house to check on them. She noticed their van was gone. Several newspapers lay at the front door. As soon as Nancy entered the house, she noticed moldy food on the counter. She couldn't find her parents' cats anywhere until she opened the bathroom door. The crazed animals had been locked there without food and water. Concerned and frightened, the woman called the Concord Police Department and reported the disappearance. Since 1979, the lead investigator for Marin County cases had been Detective Stephen Nash. Investigators found 3 9mm shell casings. It was quite obvious that robbery wasn't the motive for the murder. Nash learned that the victims were presumably Jennifer Villerin and her boyfriend James Gamble, but they didn't live in the apartment. The tenant was a young woman, and the question arose: where was Selena Bishop? Detective Nash found Selena's personal diary in the apartment. There were expressions of love for someone named Jordan. The investigator tried to piece together not only evidence from the apartment. At the Two Bird Cafe where Bishop worked, a waitress said that just the day before, they had received a call from Jordan, Selena's boyfriend. He was extremely agitated and angry at girl because he couldn't find her. From the cafe staff, Nash also learned that Selena's boyfriend concealed his true identity and didn't allow himself to be photographed. Fortunately for the detective, Selena had left her pager at work at the cafe. Using the pager, the detective found that Selena often contacted a phone number registered to Justin Helzer. Detective Nash also learned that Justin owned a white pickup truck. Selena's landlord said that she had been helped to move into the apartment with the same type of truck. According to her records, Justin Helzer bought a 9mm Beretta pistol in May 2000. This was a real breakthrough, as Jennifer Villerin and James Gamble were killed with 9mm bullets. When Taylor Helzer's photograph was shown to Selena Bishop's friends and acquaintances, they identified him as her boyfriend, Jordan. Early in the morning, August 7, 2000, Detective Nash requested a search warrant for the Helzer's house on Saddlewood Street in Concord. His request stated that the search should help in the search for Selena Bishop. On August 6, 2000, at 6 a.m., detectives knocked on the Helzer's door. No one opened, so a SWAT team used a battering ram. 2 people were detained in the house, Justin Helzer and Don Godman. Taylor, however, made a dash for freedom, jumping out of his bedroom window. He was quickly brought back to Saddlewood, dressed only in a black t-shirt and underwear. A female detective wanted to talk to Taylor Helzer alone in a patrol car. At that time, the main suspect was Justin because his gun was allegedly used in the double murder. But it was hot, and the officer opened the window slightly. When she answered a call on her mobile phone, Taylor rushed through the car window and ran down Saddlewood Street. Nearby, a middle-aged man named William Sharp lived alone with a border collie, a Malamute, and a cockatoo. He had just sat down in his favorite chair with a cup of coffee when a young man dressed only in a t-shirt and boxer shorts ran into the house. The stranger began demanding car keys, pointing his finger at Sharp as if it were a gun. The situation seemed absurd to the man since the young man had no weapon on him. Then the dogs appeared in the room and Taylor ran out through the back door. At the end of the block, Mary Mozzachi was calling an auto repair shop when a half-naked young man appeared at the door. In a second, Taylor was in a house, grabbed a knife from the counter, and began demanding the woman's car keys. Mary tried to explain to him that her car needed repairs. Taylor saw several Civil War-era rifles, but they were replicas. He demanded clothes from the woman, and she gave him her husband's pants and shirt. Grabbing scissors, Taylor cut off his long hair with one motion. Mary wasn't home alone. Her son called 911. Several officers were already nearby and detained Taylor. He returned to Saddlewood Court barefoot, dressed in baggy pants and a huge orange shirt. His long hair remained lying on the counter in Mary Motosh's house. After the commotion caused by Taylor's escape, officers at Saddlewood Court got down to business. It became obvious that something had happened in this house. There was a stain on the living room carpet that resembled the outline of a person, and someone had tried to clean it. Blowers were still working to dry the carpet. At 8 a.m. the next day, a new search began. Many strange and eerie discoveries awaited investigators in the house. There seemed to be notes about the most amazing things. Taylor made all sorts of business plans concerning women, sex, and money and wrote them down on paper. His notes on the Intimacy Project and the Kitten Club were found. A yellow notepad was also found with questions that Taylor and Dawn asked the Stamens on July 30. In the trash can was a note that said, "I won't go to jail, I'll put a gun in my head, Justin too." On paper were plans to go to Mexico, buy weapons and crossbows. There was also a reminder note about laundry, ashes, vacuum cleaner, toothbrush for the bathroom with the last shilling item, for hats and teeth, 2 hours. Everything in Taylor's bedroom seemed a mix of the mundane and spiritual. It was chaotically filled with Mormon literature and articles about sex and porn magazines. One advertisement promising penis enlargement had been cut out and carefully preserved, as was a phone sex service number. There was a tall wooden staff with a carved wooden skull on top and another with wooden eagle claws gripping a large crystal. Investigators found documents about Taylor's service in the National Guard, confirming his status as a sniper. Right by the front door was a bag of drugs, pills, and mushrooms. 3 ski masks, a reciprocating saw-operated manual, a stun gun, handcuffs, a military-style knife with serrated edges, and a black knife with an 18-centimeter blade were found. In the garage were more daggers, knives, and even a sword. Detective Nash came across a love letter from Selena Bishop to Jordan, where she called him Buttercup. Voice messages from Selena to Taylor were preserved on the answering machine. Jennifer Villerin's voice could be heard in the background, lovingly talking to a cat. Taylor, Justin, and Dawn left an incredible paper trail. They seemed to keep receipts for absolutely everything, even for carpet cleaning orders and purchases of lac shekels, 2 shovels, tape, a roll of plastic, a saw, blades for it, sports bags. Every receipt led to some cashier the detectives wanted to talk to. There was even a receipt for the purchase of red phosphorus used in methamphetamine production and another from August 1st for the initial payment for renting a jet ski. Detectives began talking to people who were either mentioned in notes at the Children of Thunder residence or lived near the Steinman's home. Witnesses recreated for detectives the scene on July 30 when 2 men hesitantly stood at the elderly couple's house while Dawn waited in a white pickup. When news of the missing Steinmans appeared, people began contacting the police with reports of seeing these people on the night of the murder. But the police still vaguely understood how these deaths and disappearances were connected. The only threat to the Helzer brothers was the gun, as well as many mysterious notes and documents found at the brothers' home. Where were the Steinmans and Bishop anyway? Or, more likely, where were their bodies? When the windsurfer discovered the first bag of corpses in the Mokelumne River, it triggered a chain reaction of searches and terrible findings. One after another, 9 bags floating in different places were fished out in the California Delta. Some were found by civilians, others by law enforcement officers, and one was discovered by a river biologist. It took the Sacramento County coroner more than a week to sort through the remains. Using dental records and putting the victims' bodies back together, it turned out that the bags contained parts of 3 people's bodies. an elderly couple, and a young woman. The presence of jaws and teeth was a big advantage, even though they were mixed up. Dr. Gregory Raber was a forensic pathologist at the University of California Medical Center. He had performed more than 5,000 autopsies, and in August 2000, he was about to add 5 more to them. He began with the bodies of Jennifer Villarine and James Gamble. Jennifer had 2 gunshot wounds passing through central areas of the brain. The doctor considered that when the first bullet hit Jennifer, her head was raised. When the woman fell, the second bullet entered a different angle. The entrance wounds were above the eyebrow and on the cheek. James Gamble's wounds were much more varied and complex. In total, he had 6 gunshot wounds to the neck, chest, shoulder, shin, and arm. 1 bullet damaged the spinal cord, which would have caused paralysis from the neck down had he survived. The expert concluded that Gamble was shot while on the bed, and 2 more shots hit the victim when he rolled into the floor. Then the doctor examined the contents of the bags with dismembered remains. Soft tissues were likely cut with a knife and bone material with a saw disc. The expert counted 11 stab wounds on the elderly man's chest, but he concluded these weren't the cause of death. The cause was difficult to determine. Probably Ivan Stayman was killed by a heart attack as a result of the beating. In one of the bags was the torso of a young woman. The skin on the shoulder where the tattoo was had been cut off. Her hat was found in another bag. The expert noted the presence of numerous injuries. There was a gaping wound in the left part of the skull, exposing brain tissue. Besides body parts, law enforcement was interested in the weights placed in the bags. These were artificial concrete stones used for garden steps. The same steps had disappeared from the backyard of Saddlewood Court. 2 days after the first bag was discovered, the Helzer brothers and Don Godman appeared in court in Martinez. At that time, 30-year-old Taylor was only charged with burglary, use of a deadly weapon, and threats due to his invasion of neighbors' homes after his escape. 28-year-old Justin and 26-year-old Don were accused of stealing the Stayman's car as their fingerprints were found in it. All 3 children of Thunder were held in jail without bail, while new evidence of their horrible crimes was discovered every day. Carrie Furman, whose modeling career in Playboy was beginning to gain momentum, very willingly cooperated with detectives, telling them about Taylor and Justin's relationship and plans for the transformation of America. On August 24th, detectives interrogated Deborah McClanahan, and she said that Taylor had asked her to provide him with an alibi by providing receipts for movie screenings and dinners. The Children of Thunder's safe was found in Deborah's closet, and the wheelchair was in her daughter's bedroom. The safe contained a Christmas present for Marin County detectives, or rather, a number of important documents and items belonging to the Steinmans and Bishop. There was also a magazine for a 9mm Beretta pistol from which Jennifer Villarine and James Gamble were killed, 2 rings belonging to the victims, ammunition, esoteric crystals, scales, drugs, items for their use, and other evidence. Important information came from the California Toll Bridge Agency in the Bay Area. When the Helders and Don Godman drove across the Antioch Bridge in a pickup with a jet ski, they were caught on camera. Authorities considered Selena Bishop as a possible suspect, which outraged everyone who knew her. Investigators assumed that Selena had threatened to report on the others and was therefore killed. In fact, the police had no idea what exactly she might have been involved in, but they already knew that Selena was going to receive 20% of the amount that Jordan was going to transfer to her account. The person who provided great assistance to the detectives was Vicky Sexton. She said that $100,000 was deposited into Selena Bishop's account at California Federal Bank on August 1, 2000. However, Sexton had begun the deposit process and planned to hold the checks until verification was complete. The signature on the check turned out to be invalid. The person misspelled the name Steinman, missing one letter. Vicky said that the check was brought by a woman who called herself Jackie. On the bank's surveillance camera recordings, investigators saw a large blonde woman in a wheelchair dressed in a cowboy hat and a lime-colored pantsuit. Of course, it was Dawn Godman. The evidence was supported by receipts and handwritten notes collected at Saddlewood Court. It turned out that the murders had a financial motive as well as a striking religious aspect. The trial is a strange combination of high drama, boredom, painstaking work, and incredible performance, but always with an unpredictable ending. For the Children of Thunder, this process lasted 4 years. Taylor and Justin Helzer never made any statements about what they had done either to the police or in court. It was Dawn who told everything about the Children of Thunder. The deputy district attorney stated he would seek the death penalty for all three. To avoid this fate, Dawn testified against the brothers in exchange for a life sentence with a minimum of 37 years in prison. The plea deal depended on her frankness. She told about every aspect of the scheme, about the murders, bank machinations, dismemberment and packaging of bodies, about disposing of them in the California Delta. But in essence, the prosecution didn't need Dawn's testimony. A huge amount of evidence had been collected, both direct and circumstantial. 450 witnesses were to be called to court, thousands of pages of documents had been collected, boxes of evidence filled 2 storage rooms. Psychiatrists fought for Taylor and Justin's lives. Both brothers were found legally sane. In 2005, following the recommendations of the jury, the judge sentenced 34-year-old Glenn Taylor Helzer and 33-year-old Justin Allen Helzer to death at separate hearings. Justin received 3 death sentences for the murder of Bishop and the Steinmans and life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of Gamble and Villerin. Taylor received 5 death sentences, 1 for each life. Not all cult leaders are true believers, but some begin to believe their own nonsense. They have to in order to be convincing. At a deep level, they know that what they are doing is wrong, but they still drag others along in a grand feat of narcissism. Taylor Helzer admitted that he was the leader, initiator, director, and inspiration for all the crimes. Maybe it was the attempt to save Justin and Dawn. Or even in this, he sought to maintain his primacy. To one of the psychiatrists, Taylor said, "Maybe I failed because I misheard God. Right and wrong are statistics and illusion, but good and evil are deeper and eternal phenomena. I regret what I did. I'm sorry for the people who died. I'm guilty of what I am accused of, but my goal was right and good. I could have avoided all this by being selfish and enjoying the paradise of my life. Some must die so others might live. The idea was beautiful and right." Dawn Godman received her sentence, one of the last. At that time, she still believed that Taylor was a prophet and that she would reunite with him in heaven. Her lawyer had to take the harmony course because she refused to talk to anyone who hadn't been reborn. But over time, Dawn realized that Taylor wasn't the second coming of Jesus Christ, perhaps just the second coming of medicine. Dawn Godman is held in a Valley State Prison for women in Chowchilla. She will be eligible for parole in 2043. In 2010, Justin Helzer attempted suicide by piercing both his eyes with a pen. He survived but damaged his brain and went blind. On April 14, 2013, 41-year-old Justin made another suicide attempt, hanging himself with a sheet. He was found dead in his cell at San Quentin prison during the evening check. Taylor is still awaiting execution of his death sentence at San Quentin. He has yet to meet the Steinmans, Selena, Jennifer, and James. He has yet to meet God and the devil behind whom he committed his crimes.